thing that woke me that night wasn't a howl. It was the sound of ribs scraping across dry leaves, like someone dragging a xylophone through the dark. I remember sitting up so fast my heart knocked against my throat, the apartment suddenly too small, the city noises outside muffled by a thick, impossible quiet. I shouldn't have gone into the woods. I knew that, but I had been chasing a story that wouldn't let go of me. Farmers whispering about livestock found picked clean, hikers who swore the paths rearranged themselves, a bright-eyed fox discovered with its skull split open like a ripe fruit. I tell you this from the shaky shelter of light now, trying to pin the first night to something factual. I was a freelance photographer then, cheap gear, cheap confidence, and the forest behind the old quarry seemed like a clean subject. Pines, mist, the kind of shadow that photographs well. The first signs felt almost laughably ordinary. Flattened bracken where an animal had slept, a strip of dark fur snagged on a thorn, paw prints half swallowed by mud. But the prints were wrong. Too long, too many pads, the stride slightly too human in its slouch. I traced them with my boot as the light died, telling myself that scavengers sometimes walk like ghosts. The smell came before the sight, metal and rot, the copper tang that makes your chest tighten. At the edge of a clearing, I found the deer. Half of it was still, the other half, not. Flesh had been torn in a way that suggested clever hands rather than hunger. Neat, surgical, as if someone had wanted particular pieces removed. Blood pooled in the hollows of the earth, blackening the moss. I told myself it was a coyote, a pack, anything to keep the voice in my head from naming what my eyes were starting to see. I didn't hear it approach. One moment I was crouched with my camera's shutter, a soft stutter in my palm. The next, something filled the periphery of my light. Something knuckled with bone and wet breath, and for the first time I realized how wrong the silhouette was. A dog, if you could call it that, moved around the trunk of a birch, like a shadow with teeth. Its skin clung to ribs like paper to a frame. Where fur should have been, there was scarred, pale hide mottled with old wounds and fresh, drying blood. Its eyes caught my headlamp and became the color of boiled bone. It stared at me, the way a thing decides whether to learn a name. I remember the camera clicking on its own, the flash a white blade. The creature flinched and then smiled, if a mouth full of broken fangs and stringy dark matter can ever be called a smile. The sound it made then wasn't a bark, it was a thin, animal laugh, like a hinge that had never been oiled, and the forest answered with a chorus of noises that were not quite animals at all. After that first laugh, I stopped pretending this was about a photograph and started pretending I hadn't seen it at all. I told myself to pack up, to leave the clearing and never come back. But leaving felt like admitting defeat to something that had already decided I was interesting. So I waited. I trained the beam of my headlamp along the trunks until the forest felt like a ribcage, and the thing, the dog, the animal, whatever it was, paced the perimeter like a predator testing a fence. Every now and then it would press its nose against the wet earth, and the way its jaw worked made me think of someone peeling wallpaper in the dark. I followed it deeper the next night. I convinced myself I was following tracks. The truth is, I was following the sound of its breathing. It left traces that made no sense. Tufts of fur tied with bits of string, scraps of fabric with a child's pattern, a ring of small bones arranged in a ring like a crown. Once it stopped and sat in the mud with its head cocked, as if listening to a memory only it could hear. When it looked at me, the ribs under its skin moved like the bars of a cage. I felt a cold, ridiculous hope that if I watched long enough, something human might peek out. The escalation was slow and then instantaneous. My photos came back wrong. Images that I'd thought were taken of empty paths showed, on closer inspection, a smear of movement in the corner that wasn't motion blur. It was a face caught in profile, or the suggestion of one. Pale, stretched, eyes too wide. I played the sequence of pictures as though they might reveal a pattern, but each file was worse. Sounds bled into my recordings, a whisper under the wind, a child's giggle layered under the brush of branches, and once, very faint, a voice that said my name the way someone says hello on the other side of a door. Sleep stopped being a refuge. I started waking to the impression of weight at the end of my bed, like something heavy and damp had settled there and decided to wait. My apartment smelled then of damp fur and iron, and sometimes at dusk I heard the scrape of claws along the siding, learning the rhythm of the house. I would peek through the blinds and see nothing but the garden, empty and normal. And yet, every week, there would be a new offering on the step. A rotten apple, a broken ribbon, a child's shoe with the laces neatly tied. The people in town whispered when I asked. Old men shook their heads and said the woods held debts. An elderly woman at the general store slid me a packet of salt with hands that trembled and said, "Not all dogs are dogs. Some keep what they take." She refused to meet my eyes when I pressed for more. Later, when I reviewed a voice memo I'd taken that night, the old woman's warning was in the background, layered beneath wind and my own shaky breathing. But it wasn't her voice. It repeated a phrase over and over, warped like a cassette left in sun. "We keep them. We keep them." I thought the last night would be the last because I wanted it to be. I built a ring, not of salt, which felt like a child's superstition, but of the things it left. Small bones threaded on twine, a child's ribbon, the shriveled husk of an apple. I scattered the objects in a sloppy circle around a stump and sat in the dark with my camera on a tripod, hands steady from the kind of resolve that turns the stomach into ice. I told myself I would watch. I told myself I'd see it up close and finally understand what I had been following. It came like a rumor at first, a scent on the air that smelled of cold iron and rot, and something floral beneath it, like perfume soaked into old cloth. The woods closed around me, every branch a finger pointing. When it stepped into the ring, the world shrank to the sound of its breathing and the click of my shutter. Up close, the thing was worse than the photos had suggested. Its skin stretched thin over a framework of ribs, its mouth a ragged industry of teeth, and there, threaded through the gaps and the folds, faces. Small, slack, like masks threaded onto a string. When it opened its mouth, the voices came out layered and human. A whisper of a mother apologizing, a boy hissing a joke, an old man coughing my name. I tried to stand. I wanted to run, but the ground felt sticky with something warm that clung to my boots. The creature moved with an ease that made me dizzy. Its head tilted, sniffing the air between my ribs and my throat, as if deciding whether I might be useful. I raised the camera, to record, to keep a copy of what could prove the truth, and the flash threw everything into a raw, white light. For a breathless second, it froze, and in that freeze, I saw its eyes were not eyes, but impressions, hollows where a person had once looked out at the world. Inside those hollows glowed something like memory. I struck at it with the tripod, as if the metal could keep a thing like that honest. It snarled, and the sound was 100 small things colliding. Its teeth found my arm, and its grip burned like someone searing paper. Pain blossomed hot and bright, and then went cold. I tasted the copper of my own blood and heard, clear as a bell, a child's giggle from somewhere behind me. It backed away with an almost careful gentleness, and then dissolved into the trees like smoke. I thought I had won because it left something behind. A scrap of fabric I recognized, a piece of a shirt I'd seen in a missing persons poster months ago. I wrapped it in my jacket and walked home with a limp and the wrong sort of calm. The town didn't congratulate me. People watched me as if I had stepped through a veil. The woman at the store crossed herself and said nothing. That night, I laid the scrap on my kitchen table under the light and opened the photos on my camera to catalog every frame. There, among the overexposed stairs and the black where the forest had been, was a single image I had not taken. My apartment, my bed, and in the corner, just gathered in the shadow like a thing that had learned patience, a pale set of eyes looking like mine. When I turned to the mirror in the hall, it smiled with my teeth.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.